have you ever wondered what a man really feels, not when you walk away, but when you walk away with peace? When you finally stop begging to be seen, when you stop explaining yourself, stop proving your worth, and instead you choose silence. What if I told you that the deepest wound you could leave isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's not born of rage, it's carved with calm, confident stillness. The kind of stillness that haunts him when he lies awake at night, realizing you never needed to yell to be heard. Now think about this, what hurts more? Being screamed at in anger, or watching someone you took for granted walk away with grace, without a single word of blame, without looking back, without needing him to notice. This is not about revenge. This is about reclaiming power, not power over someone else, but power over yourself. It's the moment you no longer operate from pain, but from clarity. It's the moment a man realizes, ooh, she's no longer waiting for me to change. And that realization, that right there, is the pain multiplier tenfold. Because you didn't just walk away, you evolved. Let's start with her. Her name was Camille, and she, like many women who love deeply, spent years in a relationship that looked perfect from the outside, smiles for Instagram, dinner dates that masked disconnection, and a partner who always promised, later. Later, he'd open up. Later, he'd be more present. Later, he'd meet her emotional needs, but later never came. Camille stayed through the cancellations, the excuses, the slow soul-draining erosion of her self-worth. She tried everything, talks, tears, ultimatums, and each time he'd say just enough to keep her hopeful. A breadcrumb of affection here, a small effort there. And because she loved him, she clung to the potential of who he could be rather than accepting the truth of who he was. Until something broke, not in anger, but in awareness. One morning, she looked at herself in the mirror and she didn't recognize the woman staring back. Tired eyes, a fake smile, a woman dimming her light just to keep someone else comfortable. And she whispered to herself, this isn't love. This is survival disguised as hope. That day, she didn't yell. She didn't explain. She didn't send a final text or post a passive, aggressive quote online. She just left, quietly, fully. And that was the day her power returned. What Camille discovered is something that will resonate with every woman listening. The most powerful walk away doesn't come from a place of emotional chaos. It comes from calm conviction, because when a man realizes he can no longer trigger you, can no longer draw a reaction, can no longer keep you orbiting his world with emotional gravity, that is the moment he begins to feel the depth of what he's lost. You see, emotional detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop trying to fix what's broken with borrowed tools. History is full of women like Camille. Think of Eleanor Roosevelt. Her husband, Franklin D. Roosevelt, had a well-documented affair with her own social secretary. But did she lose herself in public outcry or personal destruction? No, she grew. She transformed her pain into activism. She became a voice for the voiceless. And in the end, Her strength and dignity left a far deeper legacy than any betrayal ever could. When you walk away with grace, with maturity, with unshakable clarity, it does something almost mystical. It forces a man to confront the mirror he's been avoiding. And here's the irony. While you were in pain, while you were questioning your worth, he was comfortable. But the moment you stop reaching out, stop justifying, stop showing up with your heart on your sleeve, he begins to spiral. Not because you punished him, but because you gave him nothing to resist. Silence is not empty. It is full of answers. Let's explore why that is. Men, generally speaking, are wired to chase, to pursue, to respond, to challenge. But when a woman makes herself endlessly available, emotionally, physically, mentally, there's no mystery, no space, no spark. When you're always there, always trying, always giving, it creates emotional laziness in him. And emotional laziness is a breeding ground for indifference. Now reverse that. Imagine a woman who no longer tries to win him over, who no longer rearranges her life to accommodate him, who no longer over-explains, over-texts, over-gives. Suddenly, he feels the absence of her energy. Her laughter no longer fills the silence. Her support no longer cushions his emotional irresponsibility. Her validation is gone, and it hits harder than expected because he never imagined she'd walk away like this. With grace, with peace, with dignity. The greatest pain a man can feel is realizing he was loved deeply and still lost her. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she started loving herself more. Let's talk about self-respect. Self-respect is not about ego. It's not about, I'm better than you. It's about knowing what you bring to the table and refusing to beg someone to sit down. It's the invisible crown you wear when you choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, alignment over attachment. Camille didn't walk away to teach him a lesson. She walked away because she learned one. She learned that love should never require you to abandon yourself. Let me ask you this, and answer it honestly in your heart. Have you stayed in a situation longer than you should have just because you were afraid of what your absence might mean? Were you afraid he might not chase you? That your silence would be met with indifference instead of regret? If so, hear me clearly. Staying in a space where you are not fully seen, heard, and valued doesn't preserve love. It erodes it. And when you walk away the right way, with calm, quiet confidence, something miraculous happens. You begin to glow differently, not because you're trying to make him regret, but because you're finally aligned with your truth. He'll scroll through your pictures and see it. He'll hear your name and feel it. He'll sit with friends and wonder why your energy still lingers in his memory, because you left a mark that cannot be replaced. And you did it without burning the bridge. You simply stopped crossing it. Let's talk now about why this hurts him more than tears ever could. Because when you cry, he still feels powerful. He sees that you care. When you beg, he knows he has leverage. When you argue, he gets to blame your tone, your timing, your drama. But when you go quiet, when you detach, When you release him without bitterness, he has to sit with the truth that you loved him. You gave him chances. You poured your heart into a future he wasn't willing to build. And now you're no longer his option. You're his loss. The pain multiplies when you walk away without trying to change him, because it proves you've changed yourself. Now think of your own story, the late night texts, the unmet needs, the moments you silenced your voice just to keep the peace. And imagine what would happen, not if you slammed the door, but if you quietly closed it and never reopened it again. That silence will echo louder than any words you could have said. It's the kind of silence that grows heavier with time. The kind that makes him replay every moment and ask himself, why didn't I show up when I had the chance? This isn't about turning cold. It's about becoming clear. It's not about indifference. It's about inner peace. Because the most radiant version of you isn't the one who fights to be chosen. It's the one who chooses herself every single time. When you walk away this way, he doesn't just feel pain. He feels your power. The question is, are you ready to rise into it? There's a moment, silent, unseen, where a woman who has loved deeply, fought fiercely, and held on for far too long finally exhales and lets go. It doesn't come with drama. It doesn't come with a slammed door or a shouted goodbye. It comes like the final leaf falling in autumn, natural, inevitable, and somehow beautiful. And in that moment, something irreversible happens, not to him, yet to her. She is no longer hoping, no longer waiting, no longer bending herself in 1,000 directions just to keep his attention, his affection, his crumbs of maybe someday. She's free. And that freedom, it's not loud, it's sacred. But let's be honest, it didn't come easy, did it? Let's talk about you for a second. You didn't walk into this relationship thinking, I'll be the one to give, to care, to lose myself piece by piece. You walked in open-hearted, hopeful, maybe even a little naïve, but not foolish. You just believed in love. You believed in his potential. You believed that if you gave enough, supported enough, loved enough, he would rise. But here's the truth that cuts the deepest. No matter how much love you give, you can't make someone ready. You can't awaken the soul of a man who's still asleep in his ego. And this is where the pain begins, not in what he did or didn't do, not in the silence or the distance or the lies, but in you, in the slow realization that your love was never the problem, that your softness, your forgiveness, your effort, it was never too much. It was just given to someone who didn't value what it meant. Let that sink in. Because the reason walking away this way hurts him more than any angry goodbye is this. It forces him to confront a version of himself that he's not proud of. See, when you leave in pain and panic, he can say, she was too emotional. When you leave in rage, he can say, she was unstable. But when you leave with peace, he has nothing to blame but himself. And here's the raw, unfiltered truth about why that peace pierces deeper than any sharp word could. It comes from clarity. and clarity is undeniable. It's the woman who walks out the door, not because she wants to teach him a lesson, but because she finally learned hers. Let's go deeper. There was a woman named Marissa, mid-30s, brilliant, grounded, the kind of woman who radiated warmth. She fell for a man who saw her light, but didn't know how to honor it. He was charming, yes. Passionate, yes. But inconsistent, emotionally unavailable. He'd disappear for days, come back with excuses he couldn't label. The relationship, even after 2 years. And every time she tried to walk away, he'd say just enough to pull her back. One day, she realized she was in a cycle, not a relationship. She wasn't building a life with someone. She was surviving someone else's confusion. And that day, she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stopped. She stopped answering the half-hearted texts. She stopped showing up for the bare minimum. She stopped hoping the next version of him would be better. And the silence, it hit him like a freight train. Because up until then, he still felt in control. He still believed. She'll always be there. She'll always care. But when a woman like Marissa walks away this way, with finality, with grace, without needing to punish, you don't just lose her presence. You lose the possibility. And that destroys a man's ego. You see, men expect emotion. They expect drama. That's what they prepare for. What they don't expect is indifference, not fake indifference, not the kind you post about to look strong, but real, internal, I wish you well, but I no longer need to be a part of your journey. Indifference. That shakes them. It forces them to see what life looks like without you. It strips away the illusion that you'll always return. And the haunting truth. He might not feel the full weight of your absence immediately. It creeps in slowly. In the mornings when no one texts him, good luck. At night when his jokes fall flat because you're not there to laugh. On weekends when he used to feel your presence, even if only through a simple message. And then one day he realizes you're not just gone. You've healed. And that kind of healing is untouchable because now you're not walking away to make him regret. You're walking away because you deserve peace. You deserve more than being an emotional crutch, more than being an almost, more than begging for bare minimum while giving your everything. This isn't bitterness. This is clarity. And with clarity comes calm. And with calm comes power. Let's talk about something no one wants to admit. A man will only change when he realizes that his behavior has real irreversible consequences. Not when you cry, not when you plead, not when you say, I can't take this anymore, but when you actually leave, not to get a reaction, but because you've outgrown the cycle. And that's when the pain hits him hardest. Because he never thought you'd actually do it. He never thought you'd really stop trying. Stop showing up. Stop being the emotional backbone of a relationship he barely supported. But now you've gone quiet, and your silence is deafening. Your absence isn't just noticed, it's felt. And for the first time, he's not just missing your presence. He's missing who he was when he had you. That version of himself that felt admired, respected, chosen, and now that version doesn't exist anymore because you're not there to reflect it. He's left staring at the reality he created, and it doesn't look heroic anymore. It looks hollow. It looks like regret, and maybe, just maybe, it's the first time he sees the truth. She wasn't too much. She was exactly right. I just wasn't ready. But now it's too late. Let's pause here and say this. If you're listening right now and you're at that breaking point where your soul feels tired, your heart feels stretched, and your love feels unreciprocated, I want you to know something powerful. You don't have to stay in the story just because you've already written a few chapters. You are allowed to start a new one where your needs aren't negotiable, one where your voice is not silenced, one where your peace matters more than his potential, because the woman who walks away with grace, the woman who says, I'm done explaining my worth, the woman who no longer needs him to understand, she is unforgettable. Not because she tried to be, not because she made a scene, but because she walked away like a woman who finally remembered who she was. And that kind of walk away, that's the one that lingers. That's the one that rewrites a man's understanding of what he lost. That's the one that doesn't beg for closure, because it is the closure. There's something haunting about a woman who no longer flinches at silence. Something almost holy about the peace that follows the storm of heartbreak, not because she wanted it, but because she earned it. And here's what most people don't understand: healing isn't glamorous. It's not a straight line. It's not something that happens overnight or just because you walked away. Healing is what happens in the echo. It's what happens when there's no text to wait for, no call to expect, no apology to imagine. It's what you do with the quiet. It's you meeting yourself again. Let's be brutally honest. The hardest part of walking away isn't the goodbye, it's the days after. The mornings you wake up and instinctively reach for your phone. The nights you stare at your ceiling wondering if he's even noticed your absence. The aching moments when your heart still hopes he'll come back, but your soul knows he shouldn't. This is where most women break, not because they're weak, but because healing is hard, because letting go of someone who made you feel both seen and invisible, cherished and neglected, loved and forgotten, it's a paradox that breaks your brain and bruises your heart. But do you want to know what separates the woman who moves on from the one who just moves in circles? It's this. She stops needing closure from him. She becomes the closure. Let's talk about that. Closure is one of the most seductive illusions in love. You think if he just explained why, it would hurt less. You think if he apologized, you'd heal faster. You think if he admitted he messed up, you could finally breathe again. But what if he never gives you that? What if he walks away like you never mattered? What if he disappears into silence, into denial, into his own comfortable version of the story where he gets to be the good guy? Then what? Will you stay stuck in the waiting room of his emotional unavailability forever? Or will you realize closure isn't something he gives? It's something you create. And it begins with this truth. You did your best. You showed up. You tried. You stayed longer than you should have, not because you were desperate, but because you believed. And now you choose you. Because here's what healing really looks like. It looks like deleting the chat not because you're angry, but because you've outgrown rereading pain. It looks like walking past the places that used to hold memories and not feeling your stomach drop. It looks like hearing his name and no longer feeling the urge to compare your worth to how he treated you. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about finally being free from needing to. And yes, he will feel it, not at first. At first, he'll think it's temporary. He'll think she's just upset. She'll come around, she always does. But weeks pass, then months, and something starts to shift. He reaches out, and you don't respond, or worse, you respond with neutrality. No anger, no bitterness, no hope, just calm. And that, my love, is the moment the pain hits him like a tidal wave. Because for the first time, he realizes you're not pretending. You're not playing hard to get. You've actually healed. And there's nothing more intimidating to a man who once depended on your emotional need for him than a woman who no longer needs anything from him at all. Let me take you deeper. Remember, this emotional dependency is often misnamed as love. But real love doesn't keep you hostage. It doesn't keep you confused. So when you start to reclaim your emotional independence, when your peace no longer depends on his presence, it doesn't just transform you. It transforms the power dynamic. He feels the void, not just the absence of your body, but the absence of your energy, your softness, your light. Because here's the part no one talks about: a woman's love is spiritual oxygen. He may not have appreciated it while he had it, but now that he's suffocating in his own silence, he starts to see just how much you gave, how much you were. And yet, it's too late. Because the version of you that would have taken him back, she no longer exists. And that's when the pain deepens, not because he lost you, but because he realizes you found yourself. Think about this. What if the real purpose of heartbreak isn't to punish you, but to awaken you? To strip away the illusions, to burn away the parts of you that settled for less than what you deserved. What if your heartbreak was never about losing him, but about finding you, the you who no longer begs, the you who no longer breaks at the sound of a delayed reply, the you who no longer interprets silence as a challenge to prove your worth? You want to know what hurts a man the most. It's not your rage. It's not your tears. It's the woman who walks away and becomes untouchable. Untouchable not because she's heartless, but because her heart is now whole. There's a story I once heard. Simple, but profound. A woman left a man after years of emotional neglect. She moved on quietly, rebuilt her life. Years later, he saw her at an event. She looked radiant, not in a glamorous way, but in a grounded way. The kind of glow that doesn't come from revenge, but from reclamation. He approached her, said he missed her. She smiled, not cruelly, not sarcastically, just peacefully, and said, "I know." That was it. No venom, no longing, just truth. And he told a friend later, "That moment broke me more than our breakup ever did." Why? Because he saw it in her eyes. She hadn't waited. She hadn't paused her life, hoping he'd return. She had moved forward, fully. And that is the greatest pain a man feels when you walk away this way. Not that you left, but that you didn't look back. So what now? Now you become her. The woman who doesn't need closure to grow. The woman who doesn't need validation to shine. The woman who doesn't shrink her light just to fit into someone else's shadow. And when he sees that, when he watches you bloom in soil he never thought you'd escape, that's when he feels it 10 times harder, 10 times deeper, 10 times more real. Because regret doesn't hit in the moment, he